Hi, my name is Rebecca Elder, and I'm going to show you how to make this little box that's great for housing small artifacts and can be made to whatever size you need for your collections. I'm going to show you how to make these little dividers. I'm going to show you how to make the box, and they're fantastic. They are sturdy. They have no adhesives in them. I like that because A, it makes them really quick to make. You don't have to wait for anything to dry. B, a lot of adhesives off-gas chemicals that can catalyze deterioration of objects. So if we have no adhesives, then that's not a problem. So let me put this out of the way, and we'll just get started. So this piece of board is 11 by 14, and just to make this easy, I'm going to make an 11-inch square box because it's going to make my measuring, or I'm going to cut a piece that's 11 inches square and make 3-inch walls just because that's easy. But there is a handout that's associated with this video that's on the website, and that'll give you more information about how to measure exactly for the size that you want. So what do I need? I need a ruler. I tend to like a triangle to make sure I'm cutting straight lines. And I'm just going to cut 3 inches off of this. And what I can do is make a couple of marks 3 inches in, put my ruler against them, line my triangle up with this bottom, and butt my ruler up against that so I can use this angle of the triangle to make sure that my cuts are straight. Oh, except that would be really good if I had a ruler that was as long. There, that's much better. I want my ruler to be as long as the piece that I'm cutting. This is a short ruler that I travel with. In real life, you probably want something that's at least 18 inches long. And cork-edged rulers aren't the best ruler to use. If you can get something that's heavier metal, that's just a straight edge, that's much safer. If you do have a cork-edged ruler, either take the cork off of it or cut with the cork up, because the cork doesn't go all the way to the edge of the ruler, which means it's easy for your knife blade to slip underneath and give you a cut that you're not happy with. I'm just using a little break-off knife. They're inexpensive, they're easy. Before you start a project like this, you should make sure you have a fresh blade so that it's nice and sharp. Sharp knives are much safer than dull ones. And I'm just going to cut. When you're cutting, you're better off using many shallow cuts than trying to get it cut in one deep, hard cut. It'll be easier on your hands, your results will be better. And you should always cut standing up. Ideally, you would have something counter height to work at, but you can make this work. It's just not as easy on your back for long term. And I have a square that should be, let me measure it, that's 11 inches, and that's 11 inches, perfect. And then I'm going to make 3-inch walls on that because 3-inch walls will be very easy for me to measure. For measuring, I really like to use a triangle for doing corners. So I'm going to just make a mark at 3 inches here, and then at 3 inches the other way. So it ends up with little marks. Then if I put my triangle in and fit that against the marks, I know I'm going to have a right angle. Let me change it so that it's easy for me to cut. When you cut, you always want to cut towards yourself. It's another way to keep yourself really safe. If you try to cut away or on the side, it doesn't work as well. So cut. Re-engineer that. Do the same thing. This box is really forgiving. So if I go a little past the edge of my triangle, the world isn't going to come to an end. And if I go half an inch past, it's probably a bigger problem, but just a tiny bit, no. And pull out my square. And I get to do that 3 more times. To be the most efficient, you would do all of the measuring first and then all of the cutting. The board that I'm using is called B-flute corrugated board. So it's a corrugated board just like the cardboard that they use to make corrugated cardboard boxes with, except that it's made out of really, really good quality materials. Acid-free. I didn't go quite deep enough. Luckily I have a channel cut in it and I can just use that as a guide. So it's acid-free. It's going to last a nice long time as opposed to just a corrugated box that you could get from behind the grocery store, which is really acidic and you don't know where it's been, so you don't know what's in it. Perfect, and we end up with a nice little cross shape like that. Now we need to fold those edges up, and for that I need a tool called a bone folder. Sorry. So I need my bone folder. This is a shaped piece of cow bone that we use for smoothing, folding, creasing, and today I'm going to use it for scoring to help me bring these edges up into a box shape. So when you do this, you want to be really careful that you don't go through the coating of the corrugated board, through that outside layer, with the point. So just, I hold it like this, so sort of my thumb on the back, my 3 fingers in the front, and then my index finger as a guide. And just rub it gently against a ruler. And that gives me a nice angle, a nice sharp crease for bringing that up into this box shape. And I get to do that 3 times more. When you do this, you're going to find that one direction is much easier to work with than the other, because when you're going parallel to the corrugations, everything works really easily. When you're going perpendicular to them, you have to put a lot more force in it to make things move. Which makes sense because it's those corrugations that gives the board its strength and sturdiness. And now we have the beginnings of a box. Oh, it's just so cute, I can't stand it. So now we're going to start tying the box together. I'm going to want, this is an etching needle, but an awl works really well, and you can buy awls really cheaply at the hardware store or from online preservation and conservation supply houses. And I'm just going to mark where I want my ties to go. So I have to think about a few things. I have to think about where the lid is going to hit. Like if I'm looking at my sample box, I made a lid for it. If I would have put my ties any higher, I would have had a hard time getting my lid shut because they would have come down over the ties. So I want my ties to be as high as they can without getting in the way of the lid. Right, if I put my tie right down there, it's probably not going to hold it together pretty well. So for this, and if you are obsessive, you can measure, but you don't have to measure, and I'm just going to eyeball it and hope for the best. So I usually like it about ½ an inch in, and I'm just going to do that there. And I'm going to go ahead and mark all of them at the same time. And I just make little dots to let myself know where I'm going to punch through. So 8 little dots. And then I'm going to need some, this is just cotton twill tape, tying tape. I usually cut it into pieces that are about 6 or 8 inches, just because that's easy to work with. And I need 4 of those. When I do it, I like to cut them with the little angle because it makes it easier to feed them into the holes that I'm going to punch. And then I take my awl or my etching needle and just punch through. And I'm making holes that are maybe half the diameter of a pencil, so that there's enough room to hold my twill tape, but not so much room that it's loose and flopping around. And I think after you make a couple of boxes, you'll have a really good sense of what works well for you. When you punch, you don't want to punch into a surface like a cutting mat because you will damage your tools. You also don't want to punch into your fingers. So be aware of where your hand is when you're punching. And away we go. Little pointy tweezers are also useful for helping get this going. But let me see if I can do it without it first. I'm just going to feed that end through my hole and pull it out. Perfect. And then the same on the hole next to it. Come on. And pull it tight, and then I'm going to do a square knot. When I was a brownie, they taught me how to tie a square knot, and they gave me the rhyme, so I'm going to share that with you all. It's the same knot you use to start tying your shoes, that little overhand knot, and you do 2 of them in different directions. So it's right over left, and then left over right makes the knot tidy and tight. And that's a square knot, which is a really, really secure knot. If you do right over right, it's a granny knot, which won't hold. But a square knot is really hard to untie. And if you're concerned, right, you're going to end up with this little piece right here at the back, and you can grab it and give it a tiny tug, and if it holds, you know you're doing well. And then, right, you don't want these big floppy ties hang. They make it easy to tie the knot, but they'll be really ugly and messy and distracting in your storage. So you can just take your scissors, once you're sure it's a square knot, cut it off at about 1/2 inch. And 1 down, 3 to go. And the lid for the box, you'll probably want to make a lid because you don't want dust in your objects. The lid would be made exactly the same way. You would just measure this box and make it to dimensions to fit it. And again, if you go to the handout, it'll tell you what the exact corrections are. It's usually adding 1/8 in each dimension because this board is 1/8 of an inch thick. But I think it'll be easier for you to read it on the handout than listen to me try to explain it while I'm also working. And I think once you get the hang of this, this is a box you can make in 10 minutes, which is super quick. And the materials are pretty inexpensive. If it were me, I would probably look at my storage and think of what sizes I need and try to come up with a few standardized sizes, because that'll help you make the most of your storage space. But every so often you'll come across something that's really weird and you'll just go for it and make the thing that'll fit your object. I think this one, I need to make this hole, I think I need to make it a little bit bigger. But with holes, it's better to start too small, because you can always make it bigger if you need to, but you can't go back in and fill them in and start over and make them small. Last one. Right over left, left over right, makes the knot tidy and tight. Trim, trim, and that's pretty much the cutest little box ever. So I wanted to take just a quick second and also show you how to make this little divider piece, because these boxes can be very useful for holding things, collections that have multiple parts. And you could make a nice shallow one with dividers that could hold arrowheads or bullets or coins or whatever little thing you had in your collection. So I start by doing some measuring. I'm going to grab a little corner of this so I can make some notes. I like to write my measurements down. And I'm going to measure the interior dimension of this box. So the interior of this is about 5 inches. I'm not going to write on that because I'm going to use that. Let me write on this, 5 inches. And theoretically, it should be exactly the same. However, since I made this myself, there is every chance that it won't be exactly the same. And this one is 5 and like an 1/8. And that has to do with maybe the fact that one corner is pulled a little tighter than the other. Maybe I messed up my measuring, maybe I didn't cut something correctly. As you can see, it's not affecting the functionality of the box, but if I don't have my dividers the right size, it's not going to work. I also need to measure the depth of my box, which is 2 7/8 inches. Right, and 2 7/8 makes sense because we made the creases at the 3-inch mark, but since this board is 1/8 of an inch thick, we have to account for that 1/8 of an inch of board thickness. Then I'm going to subtract 1/8 of an inch from all those measurements so things will fit. So I'm going to cut a piece, so I'm going to cut this piece to 2 7/8 minus 1/8 is 2 6/8 or 2 3/4. That'll be the first one. I'm just going to measure from the edge. 2 3/4. When you're measuring along a straight line like this for cutting, you need to measure at least 3 points. 2 points may not give you the straight line that's parallel the way you want it, but if you can get your ruler through 3 points, you know it's going to be the right thickness, or the right angle. And then I'm going to just cut. You can probably hear that I'm cutting across the corrugations instead of with them, which just feels a little weird. It's kind of bumpy, but that should fit nicely. And then now I need a piece, since I have one dimension that's 5 inches, I need to cut something that's 4 7/8. And since I have something that's 5 1/8, I need a piece that's 5. And I'm just going to go pencil. Let me check the fit. It fits perfectly. It's always nice when it fits perfectly, especially on the first try. And these little dividers can usually be made out of scrap, so it doesn't cost anything to add them to your box if you want them. Get my notes out of the way. Check the fit on that. Oh, perfect. And then we're just going to make the slits to put them together. So this works. It's two pieces that are slit at the center that slot together. And drop in. So I'm going to measure the center. For the piece that's 5 inches, it's really easy to measure what the center is because that's 2.5 inches. I'm going to put a mark there. For the piece that's 4 7/8, now we're getting pretty fussy. So half of 4 7/8 would be just under 2.5 inches. And I'm not going to be concerned with having this perfect. I'm just going to say that's just under 2.5 inches is going to be as close as I need it to be. And then I'm going to draw some lines that go just over halfway. And again, I'm eyeballing this. I am not measuring. I don't have time for measuring that fussy. But now I have some little lines that I can use as a guide. And again, I need to have a slit that's about 1/8 of an inch because my board is 1/8 of an inch. So if it's not 1/8 of an inch, it's not going to fit. And it's something that I'm going to eyeball again. I'm just going to cut right on either side of that line. I love things that you don't have to be super fussy on measuring about because it makes your life so much easier. And I think I'm not going to try to cut across that top. I'm just going to pull it out. Come on. Maybe I didn't quite cut that one deep enough. That's better. I'm just going to pop that out. And one more quick one like that. Maybe I'll do it a little more elegantly. That felt better. And we'll just pop that one out as well and slot them together. So now I have a little T shape that will fit perfectly in my box, and I have 4 little compartments. And I can go ahead, I'm not going to make a lid today because it's the same exact procedure, but I can go ahead and make a lid and I will have a finished box.